My name is Henrietta, and I'm 29 years old. All my life, I've lived in the shadow of my golden child sister, Amelia. From birthday parties to graduations, my parents made their preference crystal clear. But everything changed on my wedding day. After years of being the forgotten daughter, I finally took my revenge, exposing the ugly truth behind our picture-perfect family. The facade they'd maintained for decades shattered in an instant. Before I dive into this painful journey, let me know where you're watching from and hit that subscribe button if you've ever felt invisible in your own family. Trust me, by the end of this story, you'll see exactly how I finally made myself seen. Growing up in our upper-middle-class neighborhood in Boston, I always knew something wasn't right in how my parents treated me compared to my sister. Amelia is 3 years older than me, and from my earliest memories, she was the sun around which our family orbited. She had this natural beauty that turned heads even when she was young, excelled effortlessly at school, and had musical talent that made adults stop and listen whenever she played piano. Our parents, Thomas and Eleanor Thompson, never tried to hide their favoritism. Dad built his reputation as one of Boston's most successful corporate attorneys, while Mom was a former beauty queen who now chaired various charity committees. They were obsessed with appearances and status, and Amelia fit perfectly into their vision of the ideal family. I first noticed the stark difference in how they treated us during our birthday celebrations. For Amelia's 10th birthday, they rented out an entire venue, hired professional entertainers, and presented her with a diamond necklace that had been in the family for generations. When my 10th birthday came around 3 years later, we had a small gathering in our backyard, and I received practical gifts like clothes for school and books. "Henrietta doesn't need all that fuss," my mother would say with a dismissive wave. "She's more practical than her sister." But it wasn't that I didn't want to be celebrated. I just learned early on not to expect it. The first time I truly realized something was fundamentally wrong was when I was 6 years old. My art teacher had entered one of my paintings in a district-wide competition, and to everyone's surprise, I won first place. I remember clutching that blue ribbon all the way home, my small heart bursting with excitement. "Mom, Dad, look what I got today," I announced as I burst through the front door. My father glanced up briefly from his newspaper. "That's nice, sweetie." My mother was helping Amelia practice a difficult piano piece for an upcoming recital. "Put it on the fridge, Henrietta. We're busy right now," she said without even looking at my artwork. Later that evening, when Amelia showed them a math test where she'd scored an A, they took her out for ice cream to celebrate. My blue ribbon sat forgotten on the refrigerator, eventually falling behind it, where it remained for months until I retrieved it during a cleaning day. The only person who showed me the same love and attention as Amelia was my grandmother Martha, my father's mother. She lived about an hour away, but whenever she visited, she made sure to spend equal time with both of us. "You have a special light inside you, Henrietta," Grandma Martha would tell me when we were alone. "It shines differently than your sister's, but it's just as bright. Some people just don't have the right eyes to see it yet." Those moments with my grandmother became my sanctuary, the only times I felt truly seen and valued. When she visited, she would bring 2 identical gifts, one for each of us. She asked about my interests with genuine curiosity and displayed my artwork in her home alongside Amelia's academic certificates. As a child, I tried everything to win my parents' approval. I studied until my eyes burned, joined every club I thought might impress them, and even tried to learn piano like Amelia. But nothing seemed to measure up. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" became a constant refrain in our household, sometimes spoken directly and sometimes just heavily implied. I learned to hide my hurt feelings early on. I would smile and nod when my parents gushed about Amelia's latest accomplishment while barely acknowledging mine. At night, I would sometimes cry quietly into my pillow, careful not to let anyone hear. The worst incident from my early childhood happened when I was 8 years old. I had joined a soccer team and was playing in an important game when I fell and broke my arm. The coach called my parents immediately, but they didn't answer. They were attending Amelia's piano recital and had turned their phones off during the performance. I ended up going to the hospital with my coach and sitting alone in the emergency room for 3 hours before my parents finally showed up Amelia in tow. They seemed more annoyed than concerned. "Couldn't this have waited until tomorrow, Henrietta?" my mother whispered harshly as the doctor prepared my cast. "Your sister's performance was extraordinary. The director of the conservatory was there and wants to discuss her future." Even in physical pain, the emotional hurt cut deeper. My father barely spoke, checking his watch repeatedly, as if calculating the billable hours he was losing by being there. It was Grandma Martha who came the next day, bringing me a special pillow to prop up my arm and sitting with me for hours, telling me stories and helping me feel less alone. She even drew little designs on my cast, making it feel like something special rather than a burden. "Some people don't know how to give love equally," she told me that day. "But that's their flaw, not yours. Never forget that you deserve just as much love as anyone else in this world." Those words became a lifeline I would cling to throughout my childhood, a truth I desperately wanted to believe, even when everything around me suggested otherwise. By the time I entered high school, I had developed a fragile hope that things might change. Adolescence brought new opportunities, new people, and potentially a chance to redefine myself away from Amelia's shadow, who was now a junior while I was a freshman. During my first week, I discovered the photography club. Something about capturing moments through a lens spoke to me in a way nothing else had before. Behind the camera, I could control what was seen and how it was portrayed. I could make the invisible visible, find beauty in overlooked corners, and tell stories without words. Photography quickly became more than a hobby. It was my escape, my voice, and eventually my talent. By sophomore year, my work was being displayed in the school hallways, and by junior year, I was winning local competitions. Meanwhile, Amelia continued her reign as the golden child. She was debate team captain, valedictorian, homecoming queen, and seemingly perfect in every way. Our parents attended every debate tournament, cheered at every academic award ceremony, and proudly shared her accomplishments with anyone who would listen. The contrast between our living spaces at home spoke volumes about our standing in the family. Amelia's bedroom was spacious with a bay window, custom bookshelves, and had been professionally redecorated when she turned 16. My room was the smallest in the house, with secondhand furniture and walls that hadn't been repainted since I was 8. When Amelia turned 16, our parents surprised her with a brand new car complete with custom license plates. They threw an extravagant party at one of Boston's finest restaurants, inviting family, friends, and even my father's important business associates. On my 16th birthday, I received a used camera that my photography teacher had helped me find at a reasonable price. My parents contributed half the cost, calling it my big gift. We had dinner at home, just the four of us, and my father spent most of the evening discussing Amelia's college prospects. It was around this time that I met Sarah, who would become my closest friend. Sarah transferred to our school in junior year, and having no preconceptions about my family, saw the situation with fresh eyes. "Do your parents always ignore you like that?" she asked after witnessing my mother cut me off mid-sentence to ask Amelia about her day when Sarah came over to work on a project. Her question startled me. I had become so accustomed to the treatment that I barely noticed it anymore. "They're just really proud of Amelia," I said automatically, the excuse I'd been trained to give. Sarah shook her head. "No, that's not it. My parents are proud of my brother too, but they don't make me feel invisible because of it. What they're doing isn't normal, Henri." Having someone validate my experience was both comforting and painful. It meant I wasn't crazy for feeling neglected, but it also confirmed that the problem was real. The most devastating incident of my high school years came during junior year when I won the Young Photographers of America competition, a prestigious national contest. The award ceremony was to be held in Boston, conveniently close to home, and I was one of 10 winners selected from thousands of entries across the country. When I told my parents about the ceremony, they nodded distractedly. "We'll try to make it, sweetie, but that's the weekend we're taking Amelia to tour Harvard," my mother said. "Can't you reschedule the tour?" I asked, trying to keep the pleading tone from my voice. "This is really important to me." "Henrietta, this is Harvard," my father said firmly, as if that explained everything. "These tours are scheduled months in advance. Surely you understand this is about your sister's future." The day of the ceremony, I sat alone in an auditorium filled with proud parents and their talented children. When my name was called, the applause felt hollow without my family there to share in my moment. Sarah had wanted to come, but her family had a long-planned vacation that weekend. After receiving my award and enduring the sympathetic looks from the other winners' families, I found an empty bathroom stall and broke down. It wasn't just missing this ceremony, it was the culmination of years of being an afterthought in my own family. By coincidence, Sarah's flight had been delayed, and she had rushed directly from the airport to the venue, arriving just as the ceremony ended. She found me in that bathroom, eyes swollen from crying, still clutching my award. "They didn't come," was all I could say. Sarah sat with me on the bathroom floor, not caring that her dress was getting dirty, and held me while I cried. Later, she took me to dinner to celebrate my achievement, even ordering a dessert with "congratulations" written in chocolate. "Your parents may not see how amazing you are," she told me, "but the rest of the world will. Just wait." Around this time, another source of support entered my life. Jake Mercer was in my advanced photography class and asked me out after we were paired for a project. He was thoughtful, creative, and the first person who seemed to prefer my company over Amelia's when he came to our house. My parents, predictably, were unimpressed with him. "He's nice enough, I suppose," my mother commented after meeting him, "but nothing like Amelia's boyfriend." Amelia was dating the son of a state senator, a fact my parents mentioned at every opportunity. They would make subtle comparisons between the two boys, pointing out how Jake's family wasn't connected and how his college ambitions weren't as prestigious. When Jake invited me to prom, my parents initially suggested I might not go, claiming they couldn't afford 2 prom expenses after spending so much on Amelia's dress and transportation. It was Grandma Martha who stepped in, taking me shopping for a dress and covering all the expenses. "You deserve your moment to shine just as much as your sister," she said as I tried on dresses. That spring, Grandma Martha's health began to decline. She had always been vibrant and energetic despite her age, but a series of small strokes left her weakened. I visited her as often as I could, sometimes skipping school events to sit by her bedside. Those visits became increasingly precious as I realized I might lose the one person who had always made me feel valued. High school graduation brought the final insult of my teenage years. For Amelia's graduation, my parents had rented a tent for the backyard, hired caterers, and invited over 100 people. They gave speeches about her bright future and presented her with a diamond bracelet to match the necklace she'd received years before. For my graduation, we had a small family dinner. My father made a brief toast that managed to mention Amelia's accomplishments at college more than my own achievement. My gift was a modest watch that my mother described as practical for the working world. As I blew out the candles on my graduation cake, I made a silent wish to somehow find my own path far away from the family that had never fully embraced me. When it came time for college, I made a decision that would change the trajectory of my life. I chose a photography program at California Institute of the Arts, nearly 3,000 miles from Boston. The distance wasn't accidental. I needed space to become my own person, away from the constant comparisons to Amelia. While my sister had attended Harvard with a fully funded education, our parents paid her tuition, housing, meal plan, and gave her a generous monthly allowance. I received significantly less support. They agreed to pay half of my tuition, but insisted I would need to cover the rest through scholarships, loans, and part-time work. "Art school is an indulgence, Henrietta," my father explained when I questioned the disparity. "We're being more than generous considering you've chosen such an uncertain career path." I didn't argue. The freedom of being across the country seemed worth the financial strain. California was like stepping into a different world. For the first time, nobody knew me as Amelia's little sister. I was just Henrietta, a talented photography student with her own identity. I worked 20 hours a week at a coffee shop near campus, plus weekend shifts at the campus darkroom to make ends meet. My apartment was tiny, shared with 3 other students to keep costs down, but it felt more like home than my room in Boston ever had. My roommate Zoe quickly became a close friend, along with several students from the photography department who shared my passion. In my sophomore year, I met Professor Diana Vega, who would become an influential mentor. She recognized something in my work that others had missed: a unique perspective on capturing human emotion and the interplay of light and shadow that told stories beyond the visible. "You have a rare gift," she told me after reviewing my portfolio. You don't just take pictures, you reveal truths. Under her guidance, my work evolved. I began a series capturing moments of authentic connection between people, moments when they felt truly seen by someone else. The irony wasn't lost on me that I was documenting the very thing I had craved throughout my childhood. Meanwhile, my interactions with my family became increasingly infrequent. My parents called rarely, usually with some update about Amelia's latest achievement, or to explain why they wouldn't be able to visit when they had tentatively planned to. I went home for Christmas during my freshman year, but found the experience so painful that I made excuses to stay in California for most holidays after that. The contrast between my family's treatment of Amelia and me remained stark. When she graduated from Harvard with honors, they threw an extravagant party and gifted her a trip to Europe. When I told them about my first solo exhibition at a small gallery in Los Angeles, they sent a generic congratulations text and asked if I was still planning to get a real job after graduation. Grandma Martha's health continued to deteriorate, forcing me to return to Boston occasionally, despite the emotional toll these visits took. Each time I sat by her bedside, she would hold my hand and tell me how proud she was of me, asking to see pictures of my latest work, and listening intently as I described my life in California. "You're blooming where you were planted," she would say, even if it wasn't the richest soil. During one particularly painful family gathering, a Thanksgiving dinner during my junior year, I sat silently as my parents fawned over Amelia's internship at a prestigious law firm while asking me nothing about my studies or photography. When I finally mentioned winning a departmental award, my mother nodded distractedly and immediately turned the conversation back to Amelia. I retreated to the kitchen to compose myself, and my grandmother followed, moving slowly with her walker. "Don't let them dim your light, sweetheart," she said quietly. "Some people can't see certain colors. It doesn't mean they don't exist." 3 months later, during winter break of my junior year, Grandma Martha passed away peacefully in her sleep. The loss was devastating. She had been my emotional anchor, the one person in my family who had truly seen and valued me. The funeral was held 2 days after Christmas, and I flew back to Boston with a heaviness in my heart that felt almost unbearable. At the reading of her will, I received an unexpected surprise. Grandma Martha had left Amelia her collection of antique jewelry, but to me she bequeathed her house and a significant portion of her savings. The inheritance came with a letter explaining that she had always noticed the disparity in how we were treated and wanted to ensure I had the support I needed to pursue my dreams. After the will was read, my parents were visibly shocked. My father attempted to suggest that perhaps I should share more equally with Amelia, given her greater financial needs, with law school approaching. I declined politely, but firmly, honoring my grandmother's explicit wishes. That evening, alone in my grandmother's house, now my house, I discovered a journal she had kept for years. In it, she had documented countless instances where she had observed my parents favoring Amelia, along with her own quiet interventions to try to balance the scales. Reading her words confirmed what I had always felt, but sometimes doubted the unfair treatment wasn't in my imagination, and at least one person had always seen it clearly. "My darling Henrietta deserves every bit as much love and support as her sister," she had written. "Her gentle spirit and artistic eye reveal a depth that Thomas and Eleanor seem blind to. Someday, I hope they'll see what they've done and what they've missed." I returned to California after the funeral with a newfound sense of validation and financial security. The inheritance allowed me to reduce my work hours and focus more on my photography, which began to gain recognition beyond the university. By senior year, I had my first professional gallery showing selling several pieces to collectors and receiving a positive review in a respected arts publication. I sent the review to my parents, hoping perhaps now they might acknowledge the legitimacy of my chosen path. Their response was characteristically dismissive. "How nice that your hobby is getting attention," my mother wrote back. "But do let us know when you decide on a graduate program or a stable career." After graduation, I moved to New York, drawn by its vibrant art scene and greater opportunities for photographers. I rented a small but comfortable apartment in Brooklyn, using part of my inheritance, and began building my portfolio, taking freelance assignments while developing my personal artistic voice. Over the next few years, my career gained momentum. I secured gallery representation, built a reputation for evocative portraiture, and eventually began receiving commissions from major magazines. My relationship with my family remained distant. I called on birthdays and holidays, visited once or twice a year, and maintained the minimum contact necessary to avoid complete estrangement. Amelia, meanwhile, had completed law school and joined our father's firm, following precisely the path our parents had always envisioned for her. She had married her college boyfriend, the son of a prominent Boston family, in a lavish wedding that made the society pages. I attended the wedding as expected, wearing a bridesmaid dress I hadn't chosen, and listening to toast after toast about how perfect Amelia was and how fortunate her husband was to have won her hand. My parents barely acknowledged my presence at the event, introducing me to their friends as our younger daughter, without mentioning my now successful career. When one guest recognized my name from a photography exhibition they had attended, my mother quickly changed the subject. It was at a gallery opening for my work, ironically, a series exploring family relationships and unspoken tensions, that I met James. He stood for nearly an hour in front of my central piece, a photograph of two sisters sitting at opposite ends of a long table, one illuminated by light, the other in shadow. "This speaks to me," he said when I approached him, not yet realizing I was the artist. "The composition is technically brilliant, but it's the emotional truth that's staggering." James was an architect with an appreciation for visual storytelling and the ways spaces can shape human experience. When he learned I was the photographer, his admiration was genuine and specific, referencing elements of my technique and thematic choices that revealed a true understanding of my work. Our connection was immediate and deep. On our third date, I showed him more of my portfolio, including some personal pieces I rarely displayed. Among them was a self-portrait taken in my childhood home, standing in the hallway lined with framed photographs of Amelia's achievements, my reflection barely visible in a small mirror at the end of the corridor. "Your work has such profound loneliness in it," he observed quietly. "And yet there's this incredible strength too, like you're claiming space through the very act of documentation." It was the most accurate reading of my artistic intention I had ever heard, and something about his perception made me trust him with my story. I told him about growing up in Amelia's shadow, about my grandmother's support, and eventual validation about building a life and career despite my family's dismissal. James listened without judgment, asked thoughtful questions, and held me when the emotions became overwhelming. His own family was close-knit and supportive, something that initially made me wary, as if his normal upbringing might make my experiences incomprehensible to him. Instead, it seemed to sharpen his outrage on my behalf. "You deserved better," he said simply, "and they missed out on knowing an extraordinary person." 6 months into our relationship, I reluctantly agreed to bring James to Boston to meet my family. I had warned him about what to expect, but the reality still shocked him. We stayed at a hotel rather than my parents' home, which my mother claimed was due to renovations, despite no evidence of any work being done. During dinner at my parents' house, they spent the first hour interrogating James about his family connections and career prospects. When he mentioned that he had recently won a significant architectural award for sustainable design, my father nodded politely before turning to Amelia to ask about her recent court case. James watched with increasing dismay as every conversation circled back to Amelia's accomplishments, while my attempts to participate were interrupted or ignored. When I briefly mentioned an upcoming exhibition at a prestigious New York gallery, my mother responded with, "That's nice, dear," before asking Amelia about her plans to start a family. Later that night, back at our hotel, James was uncharacteristically quiet. "You didn't exaggerate," he finally said. "If anything, you understated it. How can they not see you? How can they not be bursting with pride at who you've become?" I had no answer. I'd been asking myself the same questions for decades. Our relationship progressed rapidly after that visit. James was everything my family was not attentive, supportive, genuinely interested in my work and thoughts. He attended every exhibition, read every review, and celebrated every success as if it were his own. When he proposed a year after we met, I accepted without hesitation, certain that I had found someone who truly saw me. When I called my parents to share the news, their response was predictably lukewarm. "Oh, that's nice," my mother said. "The ring doesn't sound as impressive as Amelia's, but I'm sure it's lovely in its own way." James, who had been beside me during the call, took the phone before I could respond. "Mrs. Thompson," he said, his voice controlled but firm. "I chose this ring because it reflects Henrietta's unique beauty and artistic sensibility, just as I chose her because she is the most extraordinary person I've ever met. We're not calling to compare jewelry, but to share our happiness. I would appreciate it if you could simply be happy for your daughter." There was a stunned silence on the other end, followed by a frosty congratulations. After we hung up, I stared at James in a mixture of shock and admiration. No one had ever defended me to my parents before. "They'll never change, will they?" I asked, already knowing the answer. He took my hands in his. "Probably not. But that doesn't mean you have to keep accepting it." It was the first time someone had explicitly given me permission to stop trying to win my parents' approval, to stop subjecting myself to their indifference. It felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. As we began planning our wedding, I realized I faced a difficult decision. Despite everything, some part of me still wanted my family there, still hoped that perhaps a milestone this significant might finally be the occasion where they would see and celebrate me. But another part, the self-protective part that had grown stronger over the years, feared that including them would only lead to more pain. James supported whatever decision I wanted to make. "This is your day," he said. "You get to define what family means to you now." After much reflection, I decided we would invite my parents and Amelia. But something had shifted inside me. I was no longer the little girl desperate for their approval. I was a successful artist, a woman loved deeply by a good man, a person with value independent of their recognition. And somewhere along the way, a plan began to form. Planning a wedding is stressful for anyone, but planning one with the knowledge that your family sees it as a lesser event than your sister's adds an additional layer of complexity. James and I decided on an autumn ceremony at a beautiful converted warehouse in Brooklyn that showcased both his architectural appreciation and my artistic sensibilities. We wanted something intimate but meaningful, elegant but unpretentious. My parents' first reaction when I shared our venue choice was predictably critical. "A warehouse, goodness, Henrietta, couldn't you find somewhere more traditional? Amelia's country club wedding was so lovely," my mother said during one of our rare phone calls. "This venue suits us," I replied simply. "It has character and beautiful natural light for photographs." "Well, I suppose it's what you can afford," she sniffed, though she had no idea of my financial situation. "I do hope you're not expecting us to contribute much. Your father and I spent quite a lot on Amelia's wedding." "We're covering everything ourselves," I assured her, though the comment stung nonetheless. As wedding preparations continued, my parents made occasional attempts to influence our decisions, suggesting we use the same florist as Amelia, consider her caterer, or perhaps hire her photographer, since he did such a wonderful job. Each time I politely declined, explaining that James and I had already made arrangements that reflected our personal style. 3 months before the wedding, I returned to Boston to gather some belongings I had stored in my grandmother's house. The property was being rented out, but I had maintained a small office where I kept important papers and family mementos. While organizing these items, I discovered a filing cabinet containing documents my grandmother had saved, records of financial gifts, educational expenses, and support, provided to both Amelia and me over the years. What I found was more shocking than even I had imagined. There were records of a college fund that had been established for me when I was born, which had mysteriously been depleted by the time I reached college age. Cross-referenced with other documents, it appeared the money had been redirected to cover Amelia's expenses. There were records of tax returns showing my parents had claimed significant expenses related to Amelia's education and career development, while the minimal support they had provided for my education was barely documented. Most surprisingly, I found evidence that my parents had provided Amelia with a substantial down payment for her home, a fact they had concealed from me when I had asked for similar help and been told they simply couldn't manage it. The more I dug, the more evidence I found of the systematic financial favoritism that had paralleled the emotional disparity in our upbringing. My grandmother had apparently been keeping these records for years, perhaps anticipating that someday the truth would need to be known. Among the papers was a letter my father had written to a colleague asking for help securing an internship for Amelia. The language was striking. As you know, we've always had such high hopes for Amelia, our truly gifted daughter. The letter went on to detail all the advantages they had provided her and their expectations for her brilliant future. I sat on the floor of that small office surrounded by physical evidence of what I had felt my entire life, and something shifted inside me. The hurt was still there, but now it was joined by a cold, clear anger and a determination that this pattern would not go unchallenged. When I returned to New York, I shared my discoveries with James. He was appalled, but not surprised. "What do you want to do with this information?" he asked gently. I considered the question carefully. "I'm not sure yet, but I think after all these years, the truth deserves to be seen just as I deserved to be seen." Over the next few weeks, I continued to develop my plan. I digitized all the documents I had found, organized them chronologically, and added my grandmother's journal entries that corroborated the pattern of favoritism. I created a timeline that juxtaposed Amelia's celebrated milestones with my overlooked achievements and compiled photographs that told the visual story of our disparate childhoods. I also gathered video clips from family events over the years, home movies that captured telling moments, my parents lavishing attention on Amelia while I stood in the background. Celebrations where Amelia was the center of attention, even when the occasion was meant to be mine. Countless small instances of being interrupted, dismissed, or simply forgotten. As the wedding approached, I refined my plan. I hired additional security for the reception with specific instructions. I arranged for a special presentation during the reception, typically a time for sentimental slideshows or speeches. And I made sure that certain key people would be present: colleagues of my father, friends of my mother, people whose opinion they valued highly. The final catalyst came just 6 weeks before the wedding when my parents called with an outrageous request. "Henrietta, we were wondering if you might consider postponing your wedding by a month," my mother said casually. "Amelia and David have decided to announce their pregnancy at a special party, and the date they've chosen conflicts with your wedding, since they've already put down deposits and sent out some preliminary invitations." The audacity was breathtaking. They were asking me to reschedule my wedding so it wouldn't overshadow Amelia's pregnancy announcement. "I'm afraid that won't be possible, Mother," I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. "Our venue, caterer, photographer, and guests have all confirmed. Perhaps Amelia could choose another date for her announcement." "Well, that's rather selfish, don't you think?" my mother replied. "This is your sister's first child we're talking about. Surely your wedding arrangements aren't so inflexible." In that moment, any lingering doubts I had about my plan disappeared. The pattern wasn't going to change, not without intervention. After 30 years of being the afterthought, I was finally going to make myself heard. When I told James about the request and my response, he was initially concerned about the potential fallout of my plan. "Are you sure this is what you want?" he asked. "Not that they don't deserve it, but weddings are stressful enough without adding family confrontation." "I'm not doing this to hurt them," I explained. "I'm doing this because I've spent my entire life being hurt by them, and I need it to stop. I need the truth to be acknowledged not just for me, but for them too. They've been living a lie, pretending to be these perfect parents when they've systematically diminished one of their children. Maybe seeing it clearly publicly will finally break through." After careful consideration, James supported my decision. "Whatever you decide, I'm with you. This is your story to tell, and you have every right to tell it." As our wedding day approached, I felt an unexpected sense of calm. For once in my life, I wasn't seeking my parents' approval or hoping for their recognition. I was simply claiming my truth and my space. Whatever happened next, I would face it as a woman fully seen and loved by the partner I had chosen and the life I had built. The morning of my wedding dawned crisp and clear, a perfect October day in New York. As I prepared with my bridesmaid Sarah, who had flown in from Chicago where she now lived, Zoe from college, and two close friends I'd made in New York, I felt a strange tranquility. After years of emotional turbulence related to my family, I finally had clarity about who I was and what I deserved. My parents and Amelia arrived at the venue barely an hour before the ceremony, having declined the rehearsal dinner the night before. My mother immediately began making comparisons to Amelia's wedding. "The flowers are interesting, though not as elegant as the arrangements Amelia had," she commented as she surveyed the reception area. "And the venue is certainly unique, though I still think a traditional setting would have been more appropriate." I smiled politely, no longer wounded by her perpetual comparisons. "James and I love it. The industrial elements provide a beautiful contrast to the softer details." My father checked his watch repeatedly, asking how long the ceremony would be while Amelia subtly touched her still flat stomach, clearly eager to hint at her news, despite agreeing to wait until after my wedding for the official announcement. The ceremony itself was everything I had hoped for: intimate, meaningful, and focused on the connection James and I shared. We wrote our own vows, promising to always see and celebrate each other, words that carried special significance given my history. When I looked out at the gathered guests, I saw a genuine happiness for us, a stark contrast to the barely concealed impatience on my parents' faces. After the ceremony, guests moved to the reception area while we took photos. When we finally entered for our introduction as a married couple, the room erupted in cheers and applause. For once, I was unquestionably the center of attention, and it felt both foreign and wonderful. The reception began traditionally enough. We had our first dance, enjoyed a delicious meal, and listened to touching toasts from James's parents and our closest friends. My father gave a brief generic speech that could have applied to any bride and mentioned Amelia twice. I had expected nothing more. Then, as dessert was being served, I stood and moved to the small stage area where a screen had been set up. The DJ handed me a microphone and the room quieted in anticipation. "Thank you all for sharing this special day with James and me." I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "A wedding is a time for truth and new beginnings, which makes it the perfect opportunity to share something I've kept inside for too long." I glanced at my parents, who looked puzzled but not yet concerned. "Many of you know that I'm a photographer, someone who documents reality and reveals truth through images. Today, I want to share a personal truth, a story told through both images and documents." I signaled to the DJ, and the screen behind me came to life, showing a split-screen image on one side, Amelia's elaborate 10th birthday party, and on the other, my much simpler celebration from the same age. "Family is complicated," I continued. "Most of us grow up believing that parental love is unconditional and equal, but sometimes the reality is different." What followed was a 15-minute presentation documenting the pattern of favoritism throughout our lives. I showed financial records revealing the disparity in support we had received, juxtaposed photographs of celebrations and achievements, met with dramatically different responses, and included excerpts from my grandmother's journal describing her observations of the unequal treatment. When I was 8, I broke my arm during a soccer game. My parents missed taking me to the hospital because they were at my sister's piano recital. They arrived 3 hours later, annoyed by the inconvenience. The screen showed the hospital records next to my grandmother's journal entry describing the incident. "When I won a national photography competition in high school, an achievement that should have been celebrated, my parents skipped the ceremony to take my sister on a college tour. The message was clear: her potential future was more important than my actual achievement." I continued methodically through the years, maintaining a calm, almost clinical tone, letting the evidence speak for itself. I included the recent request to postpone my wedding for Amelia's pregnancy announcement, which elicited audible gasps from guests. Throughout the presentation, I watched my parents' faces transform from confusion to alarm to outright panic as they realized what was happening. My father half rose from his seat at one point, but James's brother, who was part of the security plan, gently but firmly encouraged him to remain seated. I'm not sharing this to hurt anyone, I clarified as I neared the end. I'm sharing it because truth matters and because patterns don't change until they're recognized. For 30 years, I've lived with the pain of being the less valued child, and today, as I begin my new life with James, I'm releasing that burden. The final slide showed my grandmother's last journal entry about me. Henrietta has a light inside her that her parents have never fully seen. Someday, I hope they realize what a gift they've been given in both their daughters, each special in her own way. Until then, I'll keep loving her enough to make up for what she's missing. As the screen went dark, the room was completely silent. I looked directly at my parents. I don't need your approval anymore. I don't need you to suddenly love me the way you love Amelia. What I needed was for the truth to be acknowledged. Now it has been, and I'm free to move forward. I turned to the wider audience. To everyone else, thank you for witnessing this moment of truth. Now let's continue celebrating love and new beginnings. The DJ immediately started playing upbeat music, breaking the tension, and servers appeared with champagne for a toast. Many guests seemed stunned, but as I stepped down from the stage, several people approached me with tears in their eyes, some sharing their own experiences of family inequality, others simply expressing support. My parents and Amelia left shortly after, my father red-faced with humiliation, my mother in tears, and Amelia uncharacteristically silent. I felt no triumph in their distress, only a profound relief at having finally spoken my truth aloud. James found me in the midst of the crowd and pulled me into a tight embrace. "You did it," he whispered. "How are you feeling?" "Like I can finally breathe," I replied. "Like the weight I've carried my whole life is gone." We spent the rest of the evening dancing, laughing with friends, and celebrating our union without the shadow of family dynamics that had haunted me for so long. For the first time in my life, I felt completely present, unburdened by the need for approval I would never receive. As James and I left the reception amid a shower of flower petals, I caught sight of my grandmother's favorite constellation, Cassiopeia, visible despite the city lights. It felt like a sign, a celestial approval of my decision to finally claim my space in the world. The days following our wedding were a whirlwind of conflicting emotions. James and I left for our honeymoon in Japan the morning after the reception, giving me physical and emotional distance from the fallout of my revelation. For 2 blissful weeks, we explored Kyoto's ancient temples, Tokyo's vibrant neighborhoods, and the tranquil hot springs of Hakone, free from family drama and painful histories. When we returned to New York, reality awaited. My phone contained dozens of messages from extended family and friends, some expressing shock, others offering support, and a few admonishing me for airing dirty laundry at what should have been a purely joyful occasion. Notably absent were any messages from my parents or Amelia. My first contact from immediate family came 3 weeks after the wedding, a formal email from my father stating they needed time to process what had happened and would be re-evaluating our relationship moving forward. The email was coldly professional, as if addressing a difficult client rather than a daughter. I showed the email to James, who pulled me into a hug. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Oddly, yes," I replied. "This isn't so different from how they've always treated me, except now it's explicit rather than hidden." The silence from my family continued for months. Through the holiday season into the new year and beyond, there were no calls, no cards, no invitations. I heard through a cousin that Amelia had announced her pregnancy at a small family gathering, considerably more subdued than originally planned. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening in my professional and social circles. The truth I had shared at my wedding had resonated with many people who had experienced similar family dynamics. Several approached me at exhibitions or events to share their stories and thank me for my courage. My photography began to evolve, incorporating themes of visibility and invisibility, acknowledgement and erasure. I started a new series called Unseen, featuring subjects who had felt overlooked or diminished in various contexts, capturing the dignity and power in their reclaiming of space. The work received critical acclaim and led to my most successful exhibition to date. James and I settled into married life with a depth of understanding and support I had never experienced before. He celebrated my successes without competition, listened to my thoughts without dismissal, and loved me without conditions. Through him, I began to understand what healthy family relationships could look like. About 6 months after our wedding, I heard from a colleague of my father's who had attended our wedding. He shared that my parents' social standing had taken a hit following my revelation. Several friends and associates had begun looking at them differently, questioning the character of people who could so blatantly favor one child over another. My father's law firm partners had expressed concerns about his judgment, and my mother had stepped down from leading several charity committees, citing family matters that required her attention. I took no pleasure in their social discomfort, but I recognized it as perhaps the only consequence that would truly register with them. For people so concerned with appearances, having their carefully curated image shattered was a significant blow. The first crack in the estrangement came surprisingly from Amelia. 8 months after the wedding, she sent an email asking if we could meet when I was next in Boston. Her tone was hesitant, lacking the confidence that had always characterized her interactions. "I've been doing a lot of thinking," she wrote. "I'm not sure I can fully understand your experience, but I know I was complicit in it, and for that, I'm sorry." I agreed to meet her during a trip to Boston for a photography commission. We arranged to have coffee at a neutral location away from family homes and memories. When Amelia arrived, I was struck by how different she looked 7 months pregnant, yes, but also somehow smaller, less certain of her place in the world. We exchanged awkward greetings before settling at a corner table with our drinks. "Your presentation at the wedding," she began hesitantly. "I knew our parents favored me, I always knew. But seeing it laid out like that, seeing the extent of it, I never realized how systematic it was, how cruel." "It wasn't your fault," I said, surprised to find I meant it. "You were a child too. We both were shaped by their choices." "But I accepted it," she countered. "I enjoyed the benefits without questioning the cost to you, and as adults, I could have done more to balance things." Our conversation lasted for hours, delving into shared memories, now viewed through different lenses. Amelia revealed that she had begun therapy after the wedding, confronting not just her role in my marginalization, but also the pressure she had felt to be perfect, to justify the preferential treatment. "I was never allowed to fail," she confessed. "Every achievement just raised the bar for the next expectation. It was a different kind of prison." We didn't resolve everything in that meeting, but it was a start. We agreed to proceed cautiously, rebuilding our relationship as adults, rather than as the roles we had been assigned in childhood. Before we parted, Amelia hesitantly asked if I would be willing to be part of her child's life. "I don't want to repeat these patterns," she explained. "I want my daughter to know her aunt, to see a woman who carved her own path despite obstacles." "I'd like that," I said, feeling a tentative hope for a relationship I had long since abandoned. My parents took considerably longer to make contact. It was nearly a year after the wedding when my mother finally called, her voice uncharacteristically subdued. "We received the invitation to your gallery opening next month," she said, referring to a courtesy invitation I had sent more out of professional obligation than expectation of attendance. "Yes, it's an important exhibition for me," I replied neutrally. There was a long pause before she continued. "Your father and I have been reassessing many things since your wedding. We're seeing a family therapist. It was Amelia's suggestion, actually." I remained silent, waiting. "We'd like to come to the opening if you'll have us," she finally said. "We want to see your work to understand this part of your life we've never properly acknowledged." I considered my response carefully. "You're welcome to attend, but I need you to understand that this isn't an instant reconciliation. There's a lot of damage to address." "We know," she said softly, a hint of tears in her voice. "We're trying to understand. It's difficult to face the fact that we failed you so completely." "It's a start," I conceded. "But real change will take time and consistent effort." The gallery opening was a turning point of sorts. My parents attended, visibly uncomfortable in the artistic crowd, but making a genuine effort. They listened attentively during my brief talk about the exhibition theme, and I watched my father's face as he studied a self-portrait that particularly captured the isolation I had felt growing up. "You're very talented," he said afterward, the simple acknowledgement more meaningful than he could possibly know. Over the next year, we established a new kind of relationship, cautious, limited, but more honest than what had come before. I maintained firm boundaries, declining invitations that felt like attempts to slip back into old patterns, and being clear about my expectations for respectful treatment. My parents occasionally reverted to old habits, complimenting Amelia while in the same breath subtly diminishing my accomplishments or suggesting my career wasn't as substantial as hers. But now I had the strength to address these comments directly, and surprisingly, they seemed genuinely shocked to have their behavior pointed out. Years of unconscious patterns were difficult to break, but at least now they were visible. Throughout this period of cautious reconnection, James remained my steadfast support. He celebrated my successes, helped me process difficult family interactions, and never once suggested I should simply forgive and forget for the sake of peace. His understanding of healthy boundaries and his unwavering belief in my worth gave me the foundation I needed to navigate these complex relationships. 2 years after our wedding, I discovered I was pregnant. The news brought joy, but also anxiety about how motherhood would intersect with my complicated family history. James and I had many late-night conversations about what kind of parents we wanted to be, how we would break the cycles of favoritism and conditional love. "Our child will never question if they're enough," James promised. "They'll be loved for exactly who they are." I reached out to my therapist to work through my fears about parenthood, confronting the worry that I might unconsciously replicate patterns I had experienced. She helped me see that awareness was the first step to change, and that my determination to do better gave me a significant advantage. During this time, I began a new photography project, documenting family relationships across generations, exploring how patterns repeat or transform. The work became a form of therapy, allowing me to process my experiences through art, while creating something meaningful for others in similar situations. My grandmother's wisdom continued to guide me. I often returned to her journal when facing difficult decisions, finding comfort in her clear-sighted observations and unconditional love. She had seen what my parents couldn't, and in her seeing had given me permission to value myself even when others didn't. The journey of healing wasn't linear. There were setbacks, painful conversations, and times when old wounds reopened. But there was also growth, a slow, tentative rebuilding of connections on more honest terms. My relationship with Amelia evolved into something I never expected: a genuine friendship based on mutual respect rather than obligatory sisterhood. As I prepared to welcome my own child into the world, I reflected on the long path that had brought me to this point. The revenge I had taken on my wedding day hadn't been about hurting my family, though that had been an inevitable consequence. It had been about claiming my truth, making visible what had been hidden, and freeing myself from the burden of seeking approval I would never receive on the old terms. True family, I had learned, wasn't defined by blood, but by love, the kind that sees you fully, celebrates your uniqueness, and creates space for you to flourish. I had found that family in James, in close friends, in supportive colleagues, and perhaps someday in a new relationship with my parents based on honesty rather than performance. The greatest revenge in the end wasn't the public revelation that had shattered my family's perfect image. It was the life I had built despite their dismissal, a life of purpose, creativity, authentic connection, and soon the chance to parent with the wisdom born from my own experience. As I placed my hand on my growing belly, I made a silent promise to my child, echoing the words my grandmother had once spoken to me. "Your light is unique and precious, and I will always, always have the eyes to see it." Have you ever felt overlooked or undervalued within your own family? I believe sharing these stories helps others feel less alone in their struggles. If my journey resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of overcoming family challenges. I'd love to know in the comments, what boundaries have you established in difficult family relationships that helped you heal? Thank you for witnessing my story, and remember that your worth isn't determined by others' ability to see it. Sometimes the family we choose is more important than the family we're born into.